And welcome. I'm Anthony Dream Johnson, founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO of the Redman Group, founder of 21 Convention, 21 Studios. Today with episode 107 of the Redman Group, The Truth About Trauma and Chaos. This would be kind of like a follow-up to last week's episode, the Fatherless Rebellion, a sort of manosphere look at the current unrest, protests, and riots that we see around America and the world. This week, though, we're going to be focusing a lot more on trauma and the connection between trauma and chaos, particularly childhood trauma and chaos. So how that plays out into adulthood. Joining me on today's show will be the one and only, two guests, both of which have been on the Redman Group before, both online, the web show, and in person at the 21 Convention live events in 2019. First up, we got Mr. Richard Grannon, a bloke from England.
I'm a bloke.
And he's from SpartanLifeCoach.com, and he's on YouTube, Instagram, all kinds of places. And then we got Mr. Ken Curry, a licensed marriage and family therapist. You guys know him from solidman.com, and his speech will be coming out soon on 21 Studios. Speaking of speeches, here we go. Richard Grannon's speech just came out recently from 21 Convention 2019. It's free now on YouTube, and previously it was at 21 University. That's the psychology of complex PTSD, healing trauma through philosophy. Ken Curry recently put out a video that did pretty good. How to Get Your Balls Back. I picked the title, not Ken on that one. But I think he actually mentioned that explicitly in the video. And that's doing really well. You guys like that a lot. And his speech will be coming out soon on 21 Studios, free to the world. For right now, it's early and ad-free at 21university.com, which you can join with a free trial for 30 days at any time at 21university.com. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today on this very special episode of the Redman Group.
Yeah, you bet, Anthony.
Thank you, Anthony.
So to open up the show, I haven't seen or talked to either of you online in several weeks now. Both of you live in different parts of the world than me. Ken, you're in America, but you're pretty far out there in Denver, whereas I'm near I'm 45 minutes from the beach, the Atlantic Ocean out here. Richard, you're over in England, I think, somewhere.
Mm-hmm. In the northwest, Liverpool.
Yeah. Talk to me. Either one of you wants to go first, but talk to me about what you've experienced. And you both live in major parts of the world. Like, you're not living in the rural areas too much. So, Ken, what have you seen in Denver with the unrest and the protests and stuff?
Well, Denver hasn't been really horrible as far as the protests seem to be very, very mild and good. The way people need to protest, I think it's happening. Yeah. I haven't been in a protest myself. My son and his girlfriend definitely have been spending a lot of time with that, and they seem to think that it's going really well. I think it's like I said, they're doing it the way that they should. Not sure how that's happening, but nothing is necessarily getting blown up and all that. Like, there's a lot of places that there's some kind of energy and element that just wants to blow shit up in our country right now. And it's not really happening in Denver. Yeah.
Yeah, Orlando's been kind of the same. I think maybe part of that has to do with the size of the city. I don't know how Denver, I think, is bigger than Orlando, but neither of them are like massive. And Orlando's been the most peaceful out of the Florida cities, whereas Miami and Tampa have been a lot more significant. Mm-hmm. Richard, what's your firsthand experience been over in England, which was, got hit by this stuff later, I think, by a few weeks, but it has now spread. Statues I see are falling. There's, violence. I saw a female cop on video in London get knocked off her horse and just totally wrecked. So what have you seen over there?
Where we are here, I am in a little bit of a rural area called Hoylake that's away from Liverpool. Today in Liverpool, we have 7,000 demonstrators. I just checked on the local news networks. Well, everything is peaceful, well organized so far. We'll see what happens. I have a lot of friends here who are ex-military, and I know that they are going uniformed to protect the war memorials and some of the statues around Liverpool. So far, so peaceful, but the potential here for huge civil unrest is massive. Obviously, these are very, very dangerous times. Very dangerous times.
Yeah. So my next question to each of you is, what was your initial response when you saw this stuff unfolding? From your perspective, Ken, you're an American. Richard, you're a Brit, redcoat, lobster back. But you guys, everyone kind of watched this unfold in real time on the news. Day by day. what were your initial reactions and responses internally to like what you were seeing? And then as it escalated, day by day. Ken?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really interesting that there's so much energy. There's just something under the surface. It's kind of the iceberg thing, that you had an event that was the tip of the iceberg that people saw. But then under the surface, there is something going on where there is just a hell of a lot of energy, a lot of, I don't know what other word to use besides energy, but everybody saw it just erupt and come forward. And it was intense, and then it kind of calmed down. But I think it's still there. There's just something there, and I'm not sure really what it is. Because it's really hard to you get so many narratives. What's the real story? We get all the information from all kinds of different places, and what do we believe and what do we know is true? And but what I see is just a heck of a lot of energy, and there's something going on. And I haven't heard anybody really put good words to what that energy is yet. And so I just know something's going on, and it's not necessarily the content or the narrative that's being put out there is actually describing what that energy is. For me, I don't know what it is. So that for me, Anthony, that's what I've just been watching this thing, and I know that something is so much deeper. There's so much more going on that's at the surface, or how else do you see it? Say it. It's kind of I don't know how else to say that, but it's just something else is going on that I don't think is being described well. But it's huge. It's really big.
No, I agree. I've never seen anything like it in my life, and I'm not yet old enough to even remember the LA riots, but obviously this is a lot bigger than even the LA riots at this point from 1992. One thing I wanted to comment.
I think that even what Richard's over there in England, and it's moving. I mean, it's going around the world. Something about this is just, it's huge. It's big.
Yeah. I wanted to comment that the energy that you're seeing is something. I was reading The Boy Crisis the other day by Dr. Warren Farrell and his co-author John Gray, and they mentioned something that we've seen discussed in the Manosphere before, although he put it more specifically. So in the book, they mentioned that testosterone is either a lot of testosterone is either going to be used constructively or destructively, to paraphrase a quote from the book. And in the Manosphere, we would more say like masculinity will be expressed this way. It can be rarely is it going to be kind of neutral, sitting around doing nothing. It's going to be positive, constructive, and build something up, or it's going to be destructive and destroy stuff, including yourself. In some cases, and that just kind of spoke to me of the energy that you're seeing. And part of it might have to do, we talked about last week, like with the lockdowns. There's so much lockdowns all over the world, not just America. And as a result, people were cooped up. People who don't usually work from home, like me, most of the people, and no one could even do something as simple as go to the gym and lift weights, which I think would be usually a pretty healthy expression of testosterone and masculinity. So it just kind of came to mind with your comments about energy and stuff like that, independent of all the narratives and all the stuff. Everybody's just so fucking pent up, from all this lockdown crap. Yeah,
I think it's bigger than the lockdown, though.
Totally.
There's more to it. Yeah.
That
was just, you're right. That was more. That was kind of energy added to what's going on, for sure.
Yeah. I don't think it helped. I think it helped set the stage for a massive forest fire, so to speak.
But Richard? there's still something going on, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Richard, what do you got?
Yeah, what was your initial response to all this, man? This must be, you focus so much on CPTSD and trauma. This must have been like watching your life's work play out in a live action movie, like World War Z or some shit.
Yeah.
World War CPTSD.
World War CPTSD, yeah. I think it played out at the level of CPTSD, and also because I spent many years teaching self-defense and control and restraint techniques. I spent 15 years working as a nightclub bouncer, as you would say in the US, in New Zealand, in Tenerife, and in the UK. So, and I also worked when I was running streetfightsecrets.com with a lot of American law enforcement, the air marshals, and sometimes even special forces. And so I'd watched this play out, and I was thinking, wow, this is really for me like the last sort of 15 years coming together in one iconic incident, which I think was traumatizing for everybody to see. being forced. I'm speaking metaphorically in the way that psychologists speak. We were forced into an observer position, a passive, impotent observer position, whilst one man slowly knee garroted, asphyxiated another man. And it's very traumatic to sit and watch that and not be able to stop it, not be able to do anything. Yeah. And I think there's a mass response trauma to that. There is the lockdown repression of libidinous energy, for sure. And there seems to be a general sense that we have had a jackboot on our faces for too long, so let's go fuck shit up. So let's just cry havoc and unleash the dogs of war. And my initial reaction was sympathy and compassion that then turned into a sense of hang on, slow down. What the hell are we doing? Like, what is this? I do think there's a genuine possibility here. There's an opportunity for some real positive changes that are absolutely necessary. But the hysteria of the response concerns me greatly. The narrative drift concerns me greatly. And the hypernormalization by authorities of new patterns of behavior concerns me most of all. 2020 is a year of hypernormalization. Right now, you can say that you're going to tear down a war memorial or smash a war memorial or tear down a statue and go and do it. You can take over parts of a city and go and do it. And I'm thinking, why? How did we get here so very quickly? It's too fast. And people think we're in a situation, an atmosphere now where if I say, hang on, guys, I'm immediately going to be stoned in the town square because this means I'm on the other side. And I'm like, can I just not be on any side? Can we think outside of black and white binary thinking?
Because, well, that's been taken away from you now. You're not allowed to think that silence is violence or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So this is a classic PTSD response: catastrophizing, binary thinking, and reducing everything into the most infantile terms, which I don't think people think they're on a pure journey to go in one direction. And I'm like, nothing in life works like that. That journey that you thrust yourself towards typically ends up being the opposite of what you were looking for. That's just human nature. That's just like the law of opposites. It just works that way. So I'm very concerned, very, very concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a common theme I've seen among basically all the speakers. I don't talk to literally every speaker ever from 21 Convention consistently, but I talk to a pretty big group of you guys through the groups and individually and stuff like that. And I've never seen, rarely would you ever see the speakers, leaders. You guys all have your own followings, your own life's work and path that you're on at a pretty high level. And I've never really seen, or it's really rare that I see you guys unanimously saying that you're really concerned in different ways, about what you're seeing, about the future of the West, about the future of America, the future of England. It's dark times. I saw Tanner Guziak, I can maybe pull his tweets up in a second, but he mentioned, although was it in public? I don't know if he tweeted in public or we're talking in private too, but he basically said that we're playing for keeps right now. Playing for keeps, like the in terms of the culture war, in terms of people being bullied into believing something. A year ago, someone could have said Black Lives Matter, or they could have said All Lives Matter, and it would have been a debate, but no one would have got fired from the job. Now you have to say Black Lives Matter, otherwise you get, what was it, an NBA announcer or something like that, or an NFL guy got fired the other day. All these people, these getting canceled and fired and shit because they don't agree with something that a month ago you wouldn't have got fired. Now, instantly fired. Get the fuck out of here. Do as you're told. Believe what we believe. Join this thing, or you're fucking, you're racist, you're evil, you're white supremacist. I mean, all this really serious stuff. I'll even pull up maybe a tweet in a second. I saw it was President Trump just like 1 or 2 days ago, and he was talking about basically people getting called racist who are not racist, and that's a really serious term that's getting devalued. So I don't know. Do either of you want to comment on the language getting thrown around right now, in terms of the hysteria, in terms of the bullying, in terms of the binary thinking, where the minute someone rejects what these people protest think this, I don't agree, I did for whatever reason, instantly the language, the language is almost as bad as the violence, right? It's not the same thing, but get his like cop car blowing up. But it seems like really serious, just throwing these terms around so loosely, whereas it's not normal. I grew up, and if you got called racist, or you called someone racist, it was a serious accusation. Now it seems to have been cheapened to nothing, like junk food.
So Anthony, my head goes to the whole idea of it's the narrative that's being told. You're asking about how the words are being used and all this. And if you remember in the speech that I did give last, gosh, when was that? Last fall. Time is going so crazy. Time is like warped right now. The whole idea of, if you remember, the word authority. I used that word and I broke it down a little bit and just said the first part of the word is author. Yep. And so in a sense, in a pretty clear sense, what's happening right now is the people that are telling the story, whoever has the power of the narrative has the authority. And so the language that's being tossed around, it's not just words, it's a story, it's a narrative. And that story is being told in a certain way. And tons of people will believe that story, and then you're just seeing it play out where the people that own the narrative have the authority.
Yeah, it feels really dangerous too.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could get into it, but there's all kinds of conspiracy theories going around and stuff. But it really does feel alarming. I'm sure you guys have seen that Gone with the Wind was just banned from HBO. And it's like, it's a movie from the 1940s. It's one of the most famous movies of all time. Banned. Books getting banned, movies getting banned. I mean, these are things that you saw before the rise of Nazi Germany, before the Third Reich rose in Germany. And these are the same people basically book burning who are screaming at everyone else to be a Nazi. I mean, the level of projection, even with Antifa, these people are basically communist fascists. And they're screaming that they're anti-fascist. It's like, no, you are the fucking totalitarian control freak. And then screaming at everyone that you're Nazi. So one of the most concerning things to me, I guess, is with the language is the projection. It's like really extreme, the specifics of it, calling people Nazis and fascists and shit. And then that's actually, it seems to be just a projection of what they're actually not only doing, but what they really believe. They want to control the way everyone thinks and the way everyone believes and stuff, to the point that they'll destroy your life. They'll cancel you. They'll get you fired from your job, everything like that. So can you guys shift gears a little bit? Can you talk to me about childhood trauma? Richard, this is more your focus than Ken. Ken, you focus obviously more on family therapy and relationships and masculinity. I have your books actually right here pulled up. But talk to me about the connection you see, from trauma specifically in growing up with children growing up, and then what you're seeing now in the streets. Flipping cars, this energy, this chaos. Because a lot of people, I haven't really seen that discussed actually in the wider narrative of all this. It doesn't fit the narrative. It's probably the reason why. But, what is the connection there? I mean, because when I see these kids in the street, white, black, or whatever, I don't see children that grew up in a healthy, happy home. I don't see children that had a good childhood. I see children that had a fucked up childhood. Maybe they didn't have a father. Maybe they were abused, things like that. So your thoughts on that, guys?
I'll go first on that one. I just wanted to go back a little bit because it's relevant. You said about the violence, and you drew the distinction between physical violence and linguistic and emotional violence. I actually don't think there is a distinction. Physical violence begins with linguistic and emotional violence. Now, if I can call you a racist or a fascist or a red hat wearing Trump supporter, and I can stick you in that bin, and I can otherize you, I am one step away from being able to do whatever the hell I like to you. And you're not wrong to compare this to Nazi Germany. This is how it was done. This is what happened when Serbia invaded the Bosnians and committed genocide on the basis of a historical grievance that went back 300 years ago. They wanted to kill them because of something the Ottoman Empire had done. And they use that as a justification based on a victim narrative, which psychopaths always do. They always rely on a victimhood narrative. When it comes to deleting history, and deleting books. But the Nazis were the book burners, but it was Joe Stalin who was the deleter of history. It was Joe Stalin who was tearing down statues and monuments. So we see the horseshoe theory in action here. When you go far enough left and far enough right, you veer towards authoritarianism and away from libertarianism. You veer towards statehood. So they're homies at this point. Far right, far left, they're barely distinguishable. They're both fascists to the extent that they're saying, do as we say or we'll hurt you, which is the universally agreed definition of what fascism is. It's hard for historians to define it properly, but that's the universally agreed definition. In a state of emergency, we use military power, which is bashing people over the head with sticks to get your political point across. And I'm amazed that people can't see how they're behaving like their projected enemy to a nuance, to just a tiny detailed degree. They're saying we don't like racism, and then they use racism to fight racism. We don't like authoritarianism, and then they use authoritarianism and appeals to power to get their agenda fulfilled. These people are all statists. They're all for higher authority. And this is where I've come to the point where I go, I don't believe the narratives in this wider escapade that we're in. I think it's a power struggle, and I think it's an ancient power struggle, and everything else is just an excuse. People are being used at this point. They're being used. They're useful idiots. Every revolution needs useful idiots.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing, Richard, that really hits me on that is the whole the word othering. Talking about other people being different, and that to me, I'm old school. When I learned about racism, it was thinking of someone else or another race as less than, and that was pretty much what it was. Pretty much othering or dehumanizing, seeing a person as less than human, and I think and it's true that the United States, or at least when we became a colony, was built on dehumanizing certain people groups. I think the indigenous people of North America were seen as less than human, like savages. And then, of course, slaves were seen as less than human. And so to your point, then we can do whatever we want to you because you are less than human. Yeah. And I think that's the key feature of this whole thing is whatever that you said, grievances that go back thousands of years that people still hold in their collective psyche, or however it's held, it's there. And I think we've made huge strides as a country to be able to shift from dehumanizing, but there are a ton of elements still where we dehumanize human beings. And I think that's at the core of what we're wanting to shift from. I think we're in the middle of a gigantic system change. And unfortunately, I don't think people have a vision for where that change is going. I think that's where we're fearful. Where is this going? But I think if we do make one change that's going to be significantly powerful, is to really get to a point where we don't dehumanize or otherize anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I pulled up that tweet from Trump. It was the White House tweet, and then he retweeted it, but it was a quote from him. We have to work together to confront bigotry and prejudice wherever they appear, but we'll make no progress and heal no wounds by falsely labeling tens of millions of decent Americans as racist. And this speaks, I think, exactly to what you guys are talking about. It's dehumanizing people by calling them racist and all this stuff. And I see so much connection between, over the past 10 years, for example, with this and feminism. The dehumanizing of men, boys, and fathers. In fact, on the Black Lives Matter website, Paul Elam pulled a quote from it. They talk about dismantling patriarchy, so it's typical feminist jargon. This is directly on the main website, Black Lives Matter. And then they go into kind of their vision for stuff. And if you go through it, there's like no mention of men, and there's explicitly no mention of fathers. They talk about mothers and parents, but fathers are just omitted from the equation. So it's like they talk about this stuff, and then it's all the feminism. They've been dehumanizing men, I think, for a long time, toxic masculinity and shit like that. But then now they even want to talk about Black Americans, and there's no mention of Black fathers and stuff like that. Actually, I saw Stefan Molyneux the other day tweeted "Black Fathers Matter," and I loved it. Immediately, I was like, yes, and I posted it, to everywhere I could. And a lot of the manosphere seemed to respond to that pretty positively. Thank God. I was pretty happy to see that. And I think, you know, Black fathers do matter. I think that's the Black community. I was talking to DDJ the other day, and he was saying, I need to verify this, but apparently the Black community was targeted by feminists much more harshly and sooner than other races in America. And apparently he said too that the Black family, the rate of intact Black families was higher than white families as recently as the 1950s, which was kind of surprising to me. And then it, of course, fell off a cliff. The single motherhood hit Black community first. You know, all the men in prison come from fatherless homes and things like that. But yeah, wild times. Can you guys talk to me a little more about trauma and how it affects you know, children and what we're seeing today? I mean, a lot of what I'm seeing in the videos and the protests and the riots, especially the looting and the arson, these are just grown children. These are not even they're adult children. You know, for example, Richard Grannon in his speech at 21Con last year, he was criticizing the blue pill, red pill, purple pill labeling that gets done, the othering in the manosphere, right? You're a blue pill, you're this, you're that, which is different from labeling ideas and concepts. It's attacking people to ostracize them and to out them. And but what Richard's response though is that the real distinction in the manosphere and everywhere should be adult, child. And Richard was like, adult, child, and he was like very like, you know, in his very British accent. But is that what you guys see too? Like, I really don't see, you know, whether these protesters are 25 or 20 or 35 or 40, or even much older, you know, even people like older are protesting too. A lot of them seem very childlike. And then it seems like, you know, the energy seems like a huge tantrum, rather, especially when it's not peaceful anyway. At least peacefully, you know, people believe things are going to protest. That's not new, but with the violence and the looting and stuff, it's like these huge tantrums people are having. So is that something you guys see? Is a lot of what you see here like basically adult or grown children running around?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the trauma side of things that you're talking about. Maybe Rich, you could touch on that. But for me, it feels like that it's on the masculinity side of things. It feels like there's a lot of men, young men out there. I think you could call it a tantrum, but I think they're finding some kind of expression of trying to express their strength, trying to let something out that they've never been able to let out. And I think in our world today, there's not a good modeling for how does a man actually really express his power. And what is happening is it being expressed as destruction or power over, rather than something that would be creative or power for someone else. And I think the category of masculinity is really big in this, because young men are moving forward in a way that is, you could even call it toxic, but at least it's very unhealthy, and it's because they don't know what to do with it, but they have something within them that they want to express, and it's coming out. Yeah, I'm not sure how else to explain that, but it feels like there's something about that with masculinity.
I think they need to awaken the internal, and then they need to embrace the void on Amazon. Yeah, Richard, you talk. Oh yeah, totally. Richard, can you talk to us more about trauma and the adult-child distinction you were making in your speech, and how it relates to what we're seeing now?
There's as far as trauma goes and personality disorder goes, there's a way of generating narcissistic personality disorder in a child, and it's typically, I would say, done through two pillars. The child needs to be told that they are unusually wonderful, unusually special, unusually gifted, and simultaneously receive a message that they are unusually awful, unusually worthless. And, you know, so you have this like split. I'm angelic, I'm above all other humans, and I'm simultaneously demonic, I'm below all other humans. They only ever receive love and adulation, and are even seen. They're only visible when performing, when doing something. And so there is a trauma to spoiling a child at the same time as neglecting a child. So we've got to look at, I think, where you see, like, you're talking about generational trauma and the effect on the riots, because I presume if we split by age, it's mainly people in their 18 to 30, I guess.
I think so.
That's where the most energy comes from. That's where all wars are fought. It's not fought between, guys my age, 50, 60-year-old guys. We just wouldn't bother. We would just be like, oh, let's just sit down and talk it out. In fact, that's what we should do. We should only have wars between older people.
Yeah.
And chatting. So there is, there's a dishonesty here where we say, okay, this expression of libidinous energy, smashing things up, punching the police, doing this and that. The point I'm making here is not whether it's justified or not. I'm saying that when people say this is commensurate and caused by this event, this bad event, systemic racism, police brutality, particularly police brutality and systemic racism, that seems to be black to white. Okay, maybe, yes, let's look at that. Let's look at the data. But the claim that this is because of this is one of the points that Adler would have made, is probably false. It's probably a justification. As we said before, there's that lockdown energy, there's the expression of testosterone. And I, in observing these riots, notice a couple of things. One is, it looks very much like festival energy. It looks very much, and I mean that in not just the modern day festivals, but the old Roman festivals, Saturnalia. Now up is down, left is right. Slaves are masters and masters become slaves. In Saturnalia, the Roman masters would feed their slaves. They would attend their slaves. The slaves could speak, they could swear at them and break the rules. But it was all symbolic. It was all very still within safe boundaries. And I know that these riots are bad, but I still would claim that they're a kind of a ceremony. They're a kind of a festival, and it's kind of symbolic because we're not really embracing change. You hate slavery. You hate historical slavery. So you want to tear down a statue of a British slave owner. Yeah, fine, tear it down. Fuck him. I'm a leftist. I don't really care about some rich guy who could pay for a statue. But let's have a conversation first, kids. Are you also going to throw your iPhone into the River Thames? Oh, you're not. You're going to tear down the statue of the slave master, but keep the iPhone that was made by modern slavery. Oh, that's an interesting choice. So, how authentic is this rebellion? How authentic is this revolution? Are you sorting your own life out? Are you fit? Are you healthy? Are you making money? Are you progressing in your own life? Oh, you're a bum. You're a bum going nowhere and you're furious. That's interesting. So it sounds like I'll get in a lot of trouble for this, I'm sure, but I don't give a shit because it's the truth. People are hiding from the truth. We've got to look at this. If I was a coach and it was one-on-one, I would just say to the client, what are you doing? What are you really doing? If you really want to make change, is this the way to make it? Or is this just masturbation? And for me, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced at all. It looks and feels very much like a ceremony, like a festival. And its purpose is egoic. It's masturbation.
And dishonest too, you mentioned. I think, yeah, hit the nail. I thought I'd show one of my favorite authors lately I've been obsessed with is The Truth Shall Set You Free. The author's Alice Miller. She's a psychotherapist from
last week.
You just what?
I just read that last week after you recommended it.
Yeah, fuck yeah. It's from a woman named Alice Miller. She died in 2010. She was a Swiss psychotherapist for many decades. Yeah, it comes to mind though. I mean, so one of the things, let's talk about this. This is Sean Smith tweeted this. Dr. Sean Smith, everybody knows him here. Good friend of the show. He tweeted this on June 11th, so just 2 days ago. And so we're talking about honesty and all these things. And he said, Sean Smith says, white privilege is not an empirical fact, in response to somebody basically claiming it was a fact. It is social psychology's ideologically motivated interpretation of facts. The real privilege comes from scolding people about privilege. Ooh. Doing so lets you elevate yourself above other white people by lecturing down to them, and elevate yourself above non-white people by claiming the mantle of white savior. Bonus points for looking sad and pentient during this maneuver. Shouting white privilege is a ninja level power move, plain and simple. Now being born is pretty. I am. That is a privilege. We have to.
He is pretty.
Yeah,
you can't deny it. He's genetically gifted in that department.
He ends the. He's actually like a really big dude too. I was really shocked when I met him. Like Ken, you're big in real life, and you look big on camera, like a large man. Sean, I was shocked. I was like, what the fuck? Anyway, but he rounds out, he finishes the thread here. We have to stop letting these ideologies divide us into false categories of racist and victim. So a lot of this, I think, speaks to what you both are kind of talking about here with dishonesty and things like that, and the othering and everything like that. But with white privilege, I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, this is something that this is really common in the protests. They're walking around with these signs. Like the biggest thing, some of the most common slogans are like Black Lives Matter, I can't breathe, no justice, no peace. But white privilege is this thing too that we're seeing, and we're seeing a lot of really weird shit too, a lot of squirrely shit. Sean was tweeting about it as well. But these very submissive, this pandering and the kneeling and like getting down in your face. There's even cops like washing feet of black people and stuff. I mean, it's fucking weird shit. So you guys talk about that a little bit. Like, white privilege, I think this is not, like Sean's saying, is not an empirical fact. I think he's 100% right. I was pleasantly surprised he tweeted this and put this out because it's very controversial right now to say that. But when people scream that as a this, or they scream even more aggressively, America is a white supremacist country or some shit. I mean, this is all like just absolute gaslighting, non-factual junk. Like this is in my opinion, is completely retarded. And it's dishonest. It's false. And falsehoods will not set you free. They will trap you, I think, into these narratives that Sean's talking about, like he's saying. The South Leading ideologies divide us into false categories of racist and victim. So I thought I don't know if you guys want to comment on what Sean's saying here, but it really seems to speak to what we're talking about as well. Truth versus falsehood, dishonesty versus honesty. I mean, these are all like made up. This is all made up bullshit. They're basically screaming. Even with the statues, Richard, you mentioned the statues getting torn down. I do have a problem with statues getting torn down, even from people that are not contemporarily looked at positively, because well, first of all, if you deny your history or ignore it, I think you're even more likely to repeat it. Number one. Number two,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Sorry, mate. No, I'm not for statues being torn down. I would be open to a conversation about saying, hey, we have a statue here that celebrates a man who was not a nice man. Should we tear it down? That's what we used to do before 2020. We'd have a conversation. Now it's just tear the fucker down. Whoa! And I'm like, maybe we should chill with that. Some of these things, maybe they do deserve to go. I wouldn't, but with some of the statues, like around the UK, there is an economic privilege. For centuries, you could buy status, and you could be a wealthy landowner who wasn't a very nice person, and then be seen on a horse in an important place. And because of history, it just stays there. I'm not for deleting history, not at all. That's Stalinism. I would be open to a conversation. Like, should we maybe think about getting rid of this thing? I'd be open for that conversation, but tearing it down, no.
But having a conversation, that's what adults do.
Yes, and we can't have that.
Let's get an amen to that. Yeah. That's a good point, because there seems to be this major rioting and even the protests. Let's talk about this real quick. This is something I wanted to tweet about, but I have not as of yet. I see a major lack of responsibility and agency, even in the peaceful protesting. Now, I want to explain why. When I look at MLK, Martin Luther King, I know he was, there's Stefan Molyneux and others have done videos on him. There's a lot more history to him that we're taught in school. He was kind of like a communist. He had some other stuff like that. But I firmly still stand behind a lot of what he said, MLK, and what he stood for. Judge me by the content of my character, not by the color of my skin, I think above all. That's an amazing statement that should echo for eternity. But he also talked about wearing your Sunday best, dressing. The guy wore a suit constantly, and so did. And I think he really expected the people around him protesting and marching with him to do that as well. Whereas today in Orlando, I saw in Orlando last week with the protesting, they're wearing flip-flops. I mean, cargo shorts and flip-flops, and they're protesting about what? They don't even know what they want. They're dishonest half the time or clueless. And then they're marching around in flip-flops. It's pathetic comparatively. Tanner would be ashamed, I'm sure. But also, I think MLK, if Martin Luther King was alive today marching on the street, I think he would be appalled and he would shut it down as fast as possible, any kind of looting and rioting and arson. And we're not really seeing that. So you see, when there are peaceful protests, so to speak, and then the rioting pops off, 3 blocks down the road. It's like they don't take any responsibility or mandate themselves to police that stuff. I've seen a little bit on video. They'll spot in some Antifa douchebag trying to bust up rocks or something, and they'll take them out. They get them arrested pretty quick. But a lot of it, that's not happening. So I think it's almost like the protesters aren't taking agency for the responsibility that comes with peaceful protesting to keep it peaceful and to make sure that you don't get weaponized and used by people like Antifa who want to pop shit off and have all these plans anyway to burn buildings down, burn police precincts down, all this really crazy stuff that we've seen, right? Which is really pissing people off. I don't think anyone in America opposes peaceful protesting. Not that I know, even when you disagree with it. Everyone seems to be very supportive of it. But all this rioting and looting has really alarmed people, and I think rightfully so. And I think there's an agency problem with maybe it's generational, surprise with feminism and shit. But they don't take any agency for how they appear, for how they dress, and what goes on around them. Even if they're not doing it, it's like you need to keep it peaceful. And I think MLK would have done that because it's a smart thing to do because it keeps people on your side, and it's stupid to let it, shit around you burn down because now it gets associated with your movement. And I don't think that's the wrong viewpoint. So do you guys have any comments on that, on agency and responsibility for protesting and what goes on when that goes during those?
For me, it just a really big category with this. It's kind of a paradox. Here is a group of people who it's not just Black Lives Matter. I think there's a whole bunch of people who place themselves into a victim role. And the victim role is a spot that does not have agency. You will not be able to have power, control, be able to change things or create something new if you just have the victim posture. And so I think this opportunity right now is I think it is an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity for people who have agency, who have responsibility, who take responsibility and have a vision, because we're in a spot right now. This is how change happens to a system. And the chaos that we're seeing is an opportunity to be able to make a change. But the people who take the victim posture will not be able to make that change. And there are other people, and I think people that have a vision to where we want to take the United States or the world or whatever it is, because it starts with where do I take my life? And if I'm a victim in my own self, then I'm not going to have agency and responsibility for me. But if I start to say I have responsibility, I'm taking ownership and in a sense taking blame for what's going on in my life, then I can actually start making a change and shift into something more healthy, more productive. And then from there, as I build my life, it moves into my, so to speak, my little kingdom of my family. And I want to change my family and I want to have influence there. And I can't have influence and I can't make change in my family if I'm living as a victim where, it's pretty much, it's not my fault. And it's somebody else that's blame. I'm blaming everybody else. And that posture will never create positive change in anybody. But I think we're at a place where if there's, there are people who have that capability to be able to make change. Gosh, I feel like I'm talking in a circle, but the thing about it is I think even our conversation right here, if this stimulates somebody to be able to say, I have a vision for where I want change to happen, then this is then people can actually make that change, something happen. That would be the people that have agency, the people that take responsibility, the people that have a vision. But it feels like this whole season of chaos that we're in right now, there is no vision at all.
Yeah, it's like Scott Adams is an author. He's also the creator of the Dilbert comic strips, if you guys remember that from the 90s and stuff. And he's talked a lot on Twitter he's big on Twitter. And Scott Adams has talked a lot about just kind of the messaging of Black Lives Matter, the persuasion. He focuses a lot on influence and psychology and stuff from that perspective. And one of his big critiques is like, what do they even want? Like, you don't even like what is the demand? What do you want? And that's a lot different from past generations of protesting and marching that had clear visions and goals.
Yeah,
and
you think about what MLK had. He had a vision.
Yeah.
I have a dream.
Yep.
He had it, and he took us as a culture, as a country, to move. He took us into that position, moving into that space.
Yeah.
Because he had a vision.
Yeah, there's no vision with this stuff. Yeah, even with the, one of the common slogans is "No justice, no peace." It's like with George Floyd, just as I don't even think the George Floyd thing is the biggest issue at this point. That seems to be kind of fizzling out. They're focused on that. But even with no justice, no peace, it's like all 4 officers were fired immediately. One of them was arrested immediately, or almost immediately. And now, the justice system is working on this as far as we can tell, right? They might fuck it up. I think the attorney general, they bumped it, for example, from 3rd-degree murder to 2nd, which that's dangerous. That might actually blow up in their face and he might get off with that. But, that's all like very specific legal stuff. The reality is, officers were fired, and, internal reviews of this stuff by the proper agencies, there's prosecution for this stuff criminally. I mean, it's like, what is the no justice? That is justice. These guys could go to jail, maybe even be killed or, executed. I don't know, for the main one. So that's been kind of the bizarre thing too. It's just like they're screaming about something it's just complete gaslighting. It's like, what do you want? You want mob? You just want to lynch them immediately? You saw a video from a cell phone, therefore you just want to execute them? Judge, jury, and executioner? It's pathetic, man. And I really think that there's no, like, the agency thing is just lacking. They don't have agency for a vision. They don't have agency for the way they even appear. In Orlando, like I mentioned, they're wearing flip-flops, and this is consistent, garbage that we see around all the riots and stuff. Richard, do you have any comments on this with agency and responsibility and victimhood?
I do. You'll be surprised to know, Anthony, that I have many things to say.
I'm shocked. I'm color me surprised. Color me surprised.
Strap yourself in. So allow me to presume to synthesize one of your ideas there. There's 2 ideas that you've presented that need to go hand in hand, which is the mention of MLK. Who is the leader of the current movement? Name me one. You won't be able to, because there isn't one.
Yep.
This is when I was talking. So we have the axis of politics, left, right, but there's also authoritarianism, libertarianism, and then there's collectivism and individualism. This is a collective movement. Martin Luther King was an individual with a philosophy, with a manifesto. This is nothing like that. There's nothing like that. No manifesto, no idea. It's completely reactionary. It's not.
Richard, are you white-splaining to me right now? Excuse me.
Absolutely white-splaining to you. And you must submit to my, that's my privilege, because I'm the colonial master of the earth, apparently. So the fact that we can't name a leader is a problem, a big problem. No leadership, no manifesto, no individualism, pure collectivism. Can I read you the quote from Healng that I had set up?
Go ahead.
If the individual, he was saying, Healng predicted all of this to a nicety, as did Nietzsche. Very, very clever men, because of the move towards a technocracy. Within a technocracy, a technocratic society, this becomes inevitable. What we're seeing now is inevitable. If the individual, overwhelmed by the sense of his own puniness and impotence, should feel that his life has lost its meaning, then he is already on the road to state slavery. What we're saying with these riots is not emancipation. It's more state slavery. It's a doubling down on slavery. And without knowing or wanting it, has become its proselyte. He goes on to say, such people are very likely to gravitate toward collective ideologies, specifically ideological infection, mass movements, and institutions which they view as having the power that they as individuals lack. You mentioned the flip-flops, and people may hear that and think, that's a silly point. Why are we talking about MLK in a suit and these people in flip-flops? Because they're slobs. Their mentality is slobbish. Their behavior is slobbish. What they're saying is, somebody come and fix it for me. Somebody come and fix this for me. Who? The people in power. So do you want power, which means you're going to have to clean up your act, or do you want mummy and daddy to come make it better? Because it can't be both. And what they clearly want is mummy and daddy come make it better. when I said they, let me be careful because I am speaking whilst white, which is a crime. I mean all those people who are involved. There are multiple ethnicities, but of one ideological infection. They think somebody's going to come and fix it, and that's why they're acting this way. It is a tantrum. Literally, as Ken said, it's a tantrum, because why does a child tantrum? They want you. It's sort of like baby terrorism. Do as I want you to do, or else I'll make this ambient noise that you will suffer with until you eventually capitulate and do what we want. But they're asking for more authoritarianism, not less. They're asking for more state slavery, not less. So they're railing against it, and they're saying, okay, we're oppressed by a class system. Now we don't want to overthrow the class system. We just want to be elevated within it. That's the most disgusting hypocrisy, and I have no time for that whatsoever. No time for it whatsoever.
Yeah, it's the oppression Olympics right now. I mean, that's been a thing for years that has been joked about online with different personalities. The oppression Olympics. I think we're just seeing at a new scale now. Everyone's trying to compete for the top spot. One thing I've been thinking about too is the feminists right now. I mean, they've co-opted in a lot of ways Black Lives Matter, and now it has dismantled the patriarchy in it and anti-nuclear family, all core tenets of modern day radical feminism. So that's, very, very sad, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, because the movement is just burn it down. I mean, it's like the last two representations of the Joker in one. It's Heath Ledger's Joker and Joaquin Phoenix's Joker in one. Some people just want to watch the world burn. Why? Because I'm sad. I'm outside of it. It doesn't work for me. I don't work for it. So fuck it. Why should anybody have anything? Let's just burn it all to the ground. And I'm like, okay, you want a revolution. Are you prepared to clean up your own life? Are you prepared to change? Are you prepared to do the work? Martin Luther King was a disciplined, educated man. Yes, he had flaws and faults like everybody else. He was also a human being. But you can't say that the guy didn't work out a moral philosophy. You can't say the guy didn't work out a systemic step-by-step agenda. That was a real man with vision. This is not that. And people will watch this and say, oh, great, another white guy whinging about the riots. I'm not whinging about the riots. I don't think your riots are doing anything. Starbucks has easily the budget to clean up after you've smashed 10,000 Starbucks. It doesn't do anything. You're not doing anything. You're certainly not doing what you think you're doing. The only thing you're actually doing is increasing the police's budget for the next 10 years. We will have a more militarized police who regularly go around with automatic weapons and in like little tanks. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I know that. No, it's fine. So two things. One of the things I was gonna say, or as I was thinking about lately too. So during, with all this, the oppression Olympics and everything that the rioting and stuff we're seeing, I think the feminists are getting, as much as they've co-opted Black Lives Matter and snuck in their really toxic propaganda. I think the feminists are going to get jealous, like they want their turn, because usually feminists are at the top of the oppression hierarchy. Like, we're the ultimate victims, women, blah blah blah, all this endless bullshit. Men are evil, fathers are useless, boys are defective girls, right? So I wonder if they're. I posted a meme the other day about this guy like rubbing his hands, like the feminists are waiting their turn. Yeah. But I really think it's not gonna be enough for them. They're gonna, like, we talk about the left and the not even the left really politically, but basically the intersectional cult of feminism, SJWs, and all this shit, right? They cannibalize each other. And I wonder if the feminists are going to turn on Black Lives Matter soon, because they're no longer in the spotlight to feed their raging narcissism that they usually have. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that, but I can't imagine feminists are going to put up with being second place forever.
Ken?
No, gosh, my mind goes to the whole thing of what's been going on the 3 months before all the riots have been happening. And I think a number of groups have taken a backseat to the coronavirus and all that. And all of that has totally just silenced so much conversation over the last 3 months, where we have a different conversation going on. And it's interesting how quickly things shifted to the conversation that we have now, if you can call it a conversation. But it's the content of whatever's going on has totally shifted. But I think, to your point, Anthony, that people, the oppression Olympics or the victim groups have taken a huge backseat for quite a while. And so how all that turns out, or how people come back screaming for their attention, it's going to happen. That's probably part of all this energy that's going on. But I think, I think just to be able to say there's going to be something that's going to get people to, whatever group it is, they're sitting on the back burner right now, and they're going to want to be on the front burner because that's what they do. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. And right now they're just taking their turn sitting in the back seat, and they're going to be coming forward before you know it.
Yeah.
And how that looks like and who comes first, I don't know.
Yeah, we're going to find out, though.
Yep.
Richard, go ahead.
When COVID was in full flow, I noticed, and I was very happy about it. Black, white, Asian, whatever you like, conspiracy theorists coming together, and we were all sharing information. I am a diehard conspiracy theorist. And when this popped off, I thought, oh yeah, they didn't like that, did they? The fact that like black, white, Asian people, Americans of all ethnicities are joining in this sort of like, we don't want to be in lockdown without proper medical evidence. And that movement was growing.
That's a really, this is a really good point. There was unity in America. No one liked the lockdowns pretty much.
No.
But, yeah.
You asked what my response was when this first kicked off. And of course, as you know, Anthony, we speak personally about our individual problems all the time. I am a recovering codependent. I've never overcome my codependency. When it first kicked off, my first response was, gosh, I'd love to invade America now, me and a bunch of redcoats, because you just see America unify instantly, because they'd have it's a militaristic nation that deals with threat, external threat. Internal threat gives America AIDS instantly. It doesn't cope well with internal threat. External threat, bunch of Brits are coming over trying to take the colonies back. Fuck that, boys, saddle up, let's go and kill him. And everybody would have been happy. So that's the Ken. I was raised in a difficult family unit. I was the peacekeeper child. When I see the adults fighting, I have this, how do I sacrifice myself to restore balance to the force? That was my first instinct. And you know, as it sort of developed into this story, I've noticed that you can sort of break everything down into family psychology: the golden child, black sheep, the scapegoating, the gaslighting, the abuse plus spoiling that leads to narcissism of that particular generation. And the thing is, where I'm lost is as I look at where we are now. And this is a sucky feeling for me, because I'm not usually lost. I'm going, I can't actually predict the next move here on the chessboard. I can't see it. I'm hoping it burns out, but I can't actually see what will happen next.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us can. That's at the very beginning of this whole thing, all the commercials, which seem to all have the same content, was we live in uncertain times.
Yeah.
And I think we do. And I think what we're talking about, you're talking about a family, that this thing is a family. And right now, to me, a really powerful part of the family is a very masculine father. And when I teach men to become stronger within their family and have a stronger voice, and it always comes back to, what is your vision for your family? What's your vision for your marriage? And to be able to take that. And I feel like that, this whole thing that there's no vision right now, it would be amazing. And maybe this is the point I was trying to get at earlier when I said somebody who has some agency and responsibility can actually take this as an opportunity and move it toward a very healthy place in our society. If we see it as a family, what would it look like if really good, healthy men with a vision, was able to actually take our society to a place that's very healthy. Healthy. I don't know what other word I'm thinking of, but
well, the opposite is, I think, what you're saying, and I think you're right, is that a lot of Western culture is very sick right now. And
it's really sick. It's missing a really strong component. Yep. And I think that's the thing is men being able to have a really strong vision This is where I want to take my life. This is where I want to take my family. This is where I want to take my marriage. This is where I want to move into my community. I think that's where it starts. And I think we have an incredible opportunity for men to really take the reins and say, this is where I want it to go, and start to do that in my little microcosm, my little sphere of influence. And the more men do that, the more this society will change and become something incredibly healthy.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely necessary. You know, you can't have a healthy future without strong families and without father-led families. And that has all been dissipated in the West, at least in America. And I think we're seeing the results of that now. Like eventually there was going to be some match was going to get lit and some forest fire of a protest was going to get going. And I think we're seeing that play out in real life now across all Western nations, not even just America, obviously, at this point. Even Canada, there's stuff going on now, and I think Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, was saying Canada is systemically racist or something. It's like, I think that's a delusional claim for America. Never mind Canada.
Parties in blackface. He's got a fucking nerve on him.
Yeah, exactly.
Four parties in blackface. I think he can sit down and shut the fuck up. Anthony, before you mentioned feminism and the BLM movement, and I got lost. Being more tuned into the black conspiracy speakers who had never listened to before COVID-19, but we're all just sharing. So then when they stopped talking about COVID and they started talking about this, I've seen a lot of very overt rejection of any kind of authoritarianism that comes from white women, and particularly feminist white women of a certain age, usually referred to as Karens. They are not going to sit side by side. I just don't think the Black Lives Matter, whoever's in charge of it, sure, but the people they rely on to fuel it, they're not. Young black men are not going to put up with feminism, and they're not going to be told what to do by a bunch of radical leftist white women. There's just no way. Just no way.
Yeah. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit again. I mentioned this earlier, but I want to make sure we hit it before wrapping up the show later. So let's pull this up. Derek Chauvin, the officer with the George Floyd thing, putting his knee in George Floyd's neck and then George Floyd dying. I haven't seen anyone yet talk about personality disorders and with this guy. Like we mentioned, that doesn't fit the narrative, I think. But do you guys have opinions on that? Like I saw Sean Smith commented about it, but I couldn't find it again. But he's definitely on his Twitter somewhere. But this guy definitely comes off to me, even the look on his eyes, like this guy has some crazy eyes going on, man. In my opinion, some other stuff too. But do you guys see? Do you see in a non-legally binding opinion? Do you see a cluster B personality disorder in this guy? I mean, because it's not just him. This one incident. This guy has a really long rap sheet over a long career in law enforcement with complaints, like actual abusive complaints. So a pattern of behavior. So I think this is at some point, Psychology Today or somebody will start talking about this. Maybe Sean will. But I do see like probably a cluster B personality disorder, certainly symptoms of it in this guy. Low empathy of behavior, even in the presence of someone begging for their life and indicating they can't breathe and stuff. So do you guys have any comments on that? And basically cluster B personality disorders, particularly as it relates to to trauma too. Probably the most commonly accepted theory of personality disorders today, especially predatory ones or dramatic ones like cluster B, is that it's a mixture of nature and nurture. So maybe nature sets the stage and then nurture pulls the trigger. So maybe a child is born with maybe a genetic component that predisposes them to becoming a psychopath or sociopath. Then their parents beat the shit out of them, abuse them and neglect them. And all of a sudden in their 20s and 30s or whatever, they're a very abusive people. They're abusive in relationships. They're abusive in their workplace, whether they're a cop or whatever they do. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. Also, right off the bat too, Richard Grannon was big. He introduced me to the concept of complex PTSD. And this is a book that Richard did not write, but is a big promoter of. And it's been life-changing for me to understand this and to look at complex PTSD. So do you guys have more comments on that, on personality disorders, particularly with this officer and childhood trauma as it relates to these things? Because one of the things, we see in the manosphere is like, oh, everybody's a train of fucked up childhood, like suck it up, walk it off, like it's not a big deal.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure they all work very well.
Yeah, yeah. So I know it's a lot I just threw at you guys, but personality disorders, trauma, walk it off, man. It's just you got spanked or you got the crap kicked out of you as a kid, like whatever, dude. Just grow up, man. Be a man, bro. Oh, wrong one. Floor's open on that one to both of you.
Ken.
Oh, okay. Well, here's the thing. So my training, expertise, and all that is not on diagnosing any kind of the disorders, personality disorders, and all that. I come from more of the family systems type of thing background. But when I think of the whole thing of even with this as a let's say the family system of that police force, it's like it's a family, and I think probably the most dramatic thing is that somehow the family kept him on the beat, kept him out on the street. And however that happened, whether it's the union or whether it's something, that's a really significant thing where he was unable to be held accountable. And for whether it was him, because anybody knows this, or who grows up in a family with a narcissistic parent or a cluster B parent, somebody that you lose yourself, you lose your voice as a child in that family. And so you think about the three other officers that were standing right there, and they had probably been with this guy, and they knew we can't speak up, we can't say no to this guy, and they probably felt like they had no voice within that little system right there.
Derek was also the senior officer. All three of them were pretty new. I think a few weeks or a few months on the police force.
Yeah,
but Derek
two of them were very new, I think.
Yeah.
But the point is they lose their voice.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is that's a major problem when you're interacting with someone who has that kind of personality. It's like the people around there lose their voice. You lose yourself. And it's really difficult to speak up for sure.
Yeah. Richard, do you see Derek? When I look at Derek, I see an abused child, most likely who grew up into a violent adult with low empathy.
Yeah, he's clearly a sadistic, narcissistic psychopath. Everything that we've heard about him and know about him indicates that. I remembered something that you said before. I just want to drop a comment about operational procedure. If the three of us were on a review board for behavior during arrests and we're trying to ascertain the use of unreasonable force, whether it results in somebody having a broken finger or dying, the correct thing to have done upon viewing that video for the three of us, I think, would have been to say, arrest all those men so we may inquire, because that's murder. You have to treat the police under those circumstances. They don't get special treatment. We can't have that. You can't have two tiers of the law. Murder is murder. I'm not saying arrest them and then throw them all in jail. I'm saying you must arrest them so that they can be interrogated, so that there can be a trial, maybe they'd be set free or not. The fact that imagine where the judicial board said fire them, that was a failing. And that is the legitimate complaint that, in my humble opinion, that's got completely lost here, is the guy should have been arrested and then there should have been an inquiry. And I think nobody is saying Derek doesn't belong in the inside of a cell for what he's done. The fact he got away with it for so long further indicates either a very, as Ken says, a lax attitude in the family or simply a total systemic failure. The guy isn't representing our force well. He's not building bridges in the community. He's not winning hearts and minds. We've got a budget. We can't afford to be sticking people in prison all the time, or can we? Is there an agenda to stick people in prison all the time? There's a whole other conversation we need to have here about the private prison complex that you have in America. That must be abolished. I mean, if I was going to put forward a manifesto for things moving forward, I would say there needs to be a change in the review boards. There must be a change in police training. There has to be. Not the problem with the states is it's not one. It is one country, but some states are great with their training. Some states are not. Some states are good, and then the towns within the states are not. So we must improve the training. We must improve the review process. And I think we have to be saying the prison industrial complex of having quotas to fill prisons, got to go. The idea that police have arrest quotas, it's got to go. Because if the three of us were cops in a local area, and we had a quota to fill, we'd fucking find a way to fill it.
Oh, they have all kinds of squirrely shit. They have like citation quotas too, and tickets, and like it's really stupid bullshit.
We can't have that. And I always say to people, this goes back to when I used to teach self-defense. There was a dreadful video of a young American soldier, maybe 22, in Iraq, and he picks up a puppy and he throws it into a ravine. And of course, because it's a dog, people went crazy. They weren't concerned about all of the human torture and suffering that went on, but a little puppy thrown into a ravine. And everybody was bashing him online. And I was like, but do you know what it's like to be in that environment? Now, Anthony, you mentioned the psychopath gene. I would say yes, but what's the psychopath gene? It's called being a human. We are savage beings. All of us are 3 days away from full-blown psychopathy. 3 days of no food, 3 days of war, 3 days of real violence. We'll all turn completely psychopathic. You'd switch off your emotions, kill or be killed, no problem. It's a stress response. It's a PTSD response. So I think we need to sort of, in my utopian view, encourage a sort of an understanding between the police and the communities. You don't want a combative relationship because as humans we'll justify it because, as we said before, we're otherizing. All three of us, nice, decent people, 6 months in an environment like that, we won't be so nice because we'll be spat on every day, threatened every day, and fearful of being shot. That's
a really good point that I'm glad you brought up. There is a lot of, even the peaceful protesting, there's a lot of combativeness to it. A lot of it does, even if it doesn't end up, throwing bottles and shit like that, never mind the rioting and stuff, but a lot of it's a lot of screaming at these cops, a lot of spitting on them, throwing water bottles at them and shit, frozen or not. And then it's abolish the police, defund the police, end the police. It's like, whoa. And these are, it's interesting too, because of course there's videos of people saying that. And then 5 seconds later, literally, they're screaming, call 911, call 911. Because some random dude gets out of his car with a baseball. I saw one guy got out of his car with a chainsaw, some Mexican guy or something. And he's screaming, he's like, go home. And he's like buzzing his chainsaw up. And they're like, call 911, call the police, call the police. And 30 seconds earlier, they were like, abolish the police, abolish the police.
Because they're statists and they're cowards and they're spineless. So they don't really have an idea. They're asking to be given something. They're not trying to work for something. These people don't understand. Ken said it before. You've got to invite blame. You've got to take the blame for stuff. There's no such thing as a right without a responsibility. A right without a responsibility is called a privilege. So if you're asking for rights with no responsibilities, you're saying with the white privilege thing, not white privilege is bad, all privilege is bad. You're saying, I'm jealous of your privilege. I'd like a slice of that pie. It's this sort of, you said squirrely before, squirrely backdoor effort to climb up the dominance hierarchy that I really don't like because it just smacks of hypocrisy.
Yeah, it sucks, man. Yeah, the privilege. It's all, Ayn Rand, philosopher and author Ayn Rand was big on this back in the 70s, 60s and 70s. A lot of what you saw with feminism, for example, had nothing to do with women's rights, had everything to do with special handouts, special privileges, gimme, gimme, gimme. You mentioned rights and responsibilities, Richard. That's my main criticism of women getting the vote in America, is it was the death of rights and of the equality between rights and responsibilities. You all of a sudden gave half the population, before men, by the way, even had universally the right to vote. You had women get this right, so-called right to vote, with no obligation, no responsibility to be drafted into the military. 100 years later, they're finally, a federal judge like last year was ruling on this somehow. It's still not, done or anything, but I think that was a big fuck up. I think women in America got the right to vote, not a right, but they got a privilege to vote without an associated responsibility. So they got that right, in which I believe people should be treated equally before the law. But from day one, it hasn't been that. Me and my little brother are still subject to selective service and military draft. My two sisters are not, and they never have been. And it's like, this is not equality. From day one, feminism has fucked that up.
Are they not shoved into factories in World War II? That's what we did with British women. They were forced into basically slave labor. Did they not?
I don't think they were forced. I know a lot of women did. A lot of women took a lot of pride in it. A lot of grandmothers and stuff that today you would talk to.
Queen was working as well.
Yeah, but no, it's the rights and responsibilities. That's a great point. There has to be an association between the two, and when you disconnect them, you get problems. And I think women today voting, whenever they vote for presidential candidate in America, they're never thinking firsthand about going to war. They're never thinking about, they can think abstractly about it. You know, my brother, my father, my husband might go to war, my son, but never is it firsthand. They never have, when they vote.
Same thing about the politicians. They're not fucking going to war either, the cheeky cunts.
That's right. That's right. But if they were a man, at some point in their life, they were at risk of going to war by force. And women in America have never had that problem. They've never had that risk. I know young
George W. Bush.
Yeah.
Captain of the cheerleading team.
I've seen women in America, the millennial women, that aren't even aware that a military draft still exists in America. My age, 29, 30 years old, no idea. Just oblivious. And it just reminds me a lot of what you're saying there with the privilege and stuff. Gimme, 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 gimme. And then abolish, abolish, abolish. Wait, come back. No, don't be abolished. Call 911. Call 911. You know, it's just nuts, man. Where did I want to go with this? Oh, yeah. So this is actually an interesting comment that we got pulled up here. So this guy's commenting, so we can look at complex PTSD for the murderer, but not for the people repeatedly targeted to be murdered, abused, and locked up more than any other race. So my first thought about this, and before you guys, if you want to hop in on this, you know, Derek Chauvin is responsible, if I'm saying his name right, is responsible for his actions as an adult. Whether he's a psychopath, a sociopath, has a personality disorder, is mentally ill, none of that alleviates responsibility from his actions, especially as a police officer and law enforcement officer with a sworn oath to the Constitution of his state, as well as the federal Constitution. So I believe sincerely, in my completely informal opinion, he is fucked up in the head. He would probably meet the criteria for psychopathy or something similar to it in the DSM, in actual, you know, literature and stuff. But he's responsible for his actions as an adult, and he was responsible for healing from it too. So if he was, let's say it comes out years from now that he was abused and beaten the shit out of as a kid by his parents or something, that's very unfortunate. That's not his fault. He was a victim of child abuse and stuff like that, and beating. But it was his responsibility as an adult to heal from that. And if you don't, and you traumatize other people, and in his case, kill someone or get someone killed or whatever, manslaughter, that's still on him, no matter what. The rest of this question, I don't know if you guys want to hop into this or not. But yeah, there's plenty of abuse to go around. I mean, everybody, you know, all these guys that ended up in prison and stuff, a lot of it, you know, they come from broken homes. They come from fatherless homes, or they come from a single mother home where their single mother, I think there's a lot of stats on this, but single mothers are very abusive towards their children. They're impulsive and emotional, and they spank without mercy. There's even some famous quotes, I think, that, God, what was the quote? It's like, it's men that go to war get unhinged and they do crazy shit. Women do that with their children, was the quote. It was from a pretty famous psychologist. I don't know who it was, but it was kind of speaks to this. So do you guys have any comments on this comment or question here from the reader?
I do. Well, I will shut the fuck up for a minute. Ken, please.
No, I just, Anthony, you're kind of pushing on. I think part of this was saying, you're saying that Chauvin is totally responsible for his actions. I think that's not it. It's not the PTSD. I think for anybody, the whole idea of if you've been through any abuse, the statement, you know, the abuse is not your fault, but healing from it is your responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think if you get to a spot where you are continuing, it goes back to that whole thing of just having that victim posture. And if I always see myself as a victim of abuse, then I'm not going to be able to have the power to be able to heal and to be able to take responsibility for me being different in my life. And that's part of what I think people get stuck. And the officer who did this, most likely he never really did any healing. If it does turn out that he has, you know, the PTSD or the childhood trauma or whatever,
yeah.
You know, it's his responsibility. And so I'm not sure exactly where the question comes from, but yeah, the question, I think it always comes back to, even if these things happen to me, even if I am abused, what am I going to do about it? And it's not asking the word, you know, why did this happen to me? That's the victim's question. But what am I going to do in my life, or how am I going to move through this? That's a person that has agency, and moving forward is what we want to be able to do. And I know there's so much more to that question. And
he followed it up. he posted a follow-up with this, the source of stress black people get from the police. I mean, that's now getting into systemic police bias and stuff like that, which in my understanding doesn't exist in America, in spite of the hysteria right now, in terms of stats and numbers and stuff like that. Which
But,
really pisses.
but the thing is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Anthony.
Go ahead.
But he's talking about something that is real for what black people feel. And the best illustration I've heard that is, I'm sitting here, I don't understand that because I'm not a black man. And the best illustration is that when my wife had a baby and we have 3 kids and I'm standing there in the delivery room with her, I have no idea what it feels like to deliver a baby. But I have this empathy. I feel for her, but I don't understand what it is. And for that statement, the whole thing of, what black people experience, I don't know. I'm going to do my best to have empathy, but I'm never going to know what that feels like about that, what he's talking about with the stress that he gets from interacting with the police. I don't know how else to say that. Yeah.
No, technically I agree with you. Firsthand, there's no way to know because if you're not black, you can't know it firsthand. Same thing with being a woman. None of us will ever know what it's like to be a woman firsthand. And the same is true in reverse. Women will never know what it's like to be a man, to get kicked in the nuts, to get a hard on, to whatever, to be a leader and to take authority and to be masculine and stuff. With the systemic police racism and bias, there's a lot of articles coming out in major publications that are challenging that, and no one wants to hear it. No one wants to look at the numbers and stats, and they just jump to conclude. Even in the manosphere, there's a little bit of this. Mostly, it's like actually there's no evidence of that. And what it should be looked into. It's a debate to be had and a discussion, but the big thing is seeing people dismiss and not present their arguments and the reasons for how they're coming to their conclusions, and then B, they're just rejecting numbers and data. They just don't want to hear it. Even on video, there's people in the streets now, going up to people saying, "Hey, look at these numbers, look at these stats," and people just don't want to hear it. They'll scream at the reporter like, "Fuck you, fuck off, white privilege, white supremacists, all this stuff." And it's like a narrative that's been built and it's been installed in people's heads, and they don't want to. It's just like it's like women with the wage gap. No matter how many times that shit gets busted up by Jordan Peterson or Christina Hoff Sommers or anyone else on YouTube and stuff, no one wants to hear it. You just keep hearing wage gap, wage gap, wage gap, wage gap, and there's no evidence of it. It basically doesn't exist.
I have something to say.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
you have the ability to mute me at any point, don't you, Anthony?
I would never.
Yeah,
I am anti-fascist. I'm anti-fascist, legitimately.
So, if you could put the young gentleman's question back up on the screen.
The first one?
Yes, Simply Marvelous TV. Okay, so here is a young black man looking, I can see from his icon, from his avatar, looking at 3 white men talking about Derek and talking about CPTSD. And he sat there and he's thinking, are these 3 white guys justifying the trauma and the pain of a white man that causes him to kill a black man whilst ignoring the trauma and the pain that causes people to riot? Because we've been saying that neither of us is particularly keen on the rioting as a response. So I think you guys have addressed it. Like, no, we're saying he does have complex PTSD, but he's responsible for healing his own complex PTSD. I do think, in my humble opinion and in my observations, there is a case to be made that black people have been treated poorly, certainly in America, and to a certain degree in the United Kingdom as well. There has been scapegoating within the American family. There has been gaslighting within the American family. But despite that, to reiterate what Ken said, there is this thing called a drama triangle where you're victim, abuser, or rescuer. It comes from transactional analysis. And when we get stuck in victim mode, we can only wait for a rescuer to come and save us. And if Black America, whatever that amorphous mass may be or may not be, is waiting for white America to come and save them, this is not the right mentality. And I'm saying that with my stupid white face. I've never been black. I don't know what it's like to be black. But I can say, as a psychologist who understands human beings, we can't stop there. Yes, I think there is legitimate grievance. I think black people are stopped more than white people. I think that there is evidence that certainly within the prison industry, blacks and Hispanics and minorities are targeted more than whites. There are statistics that back that. But, you know, so what are we going to do with that? How do we get out of that? How do we escape that? Are we going to ask for systemic change from the person who's pressing the jackboot down? I think that's a mistake, my friends. I really, really do. If you say, make it better for me, I just do not believe it's going to happen. The recovery from complex PTSD means recovering from codependency as well. We've got to reclaim sovereignty, reclaim agency, and give up a lot of the ideas of vengeance. Because let's be honest, there is a desire for vengeance here, and I think it's justified. I would be angry too. I would be fucking furious as well, for historical reasons and for current reasons. There is legitimate grievance. There's a legitimate.
Well, hang on. Let's talk about the history here, because in America, one of the comments I've seen from a lot of people, black and white, is that anybody who's angry about history that's pretty ancient at this point, you are not a victim of that period. Like you did not live during that time. Your parents didn't live during that time. Your grandparents didn't live during that time. You were not, like, this did not happen to you. You were not enslaved. It doesn't mean things are perfect today, not by any means. But it's like these people looking back, and it's like these people have no purpose and no meaning in their life. And they're just grappling at ancient history to latch on to something to feel important, like the victim oppression Olympics and stuff like that. And slavery has been done by, in America, for example, too, that, the CEO, I think, of BET, like a major television network, was calling for $14 trillion in reparations the other day. And like this from ancient, offenses that happened over a century ago. And that have happened in every direction throughout history. There are still millions of people today, to my knowledge, enslaved in Africa. Like literal, like modern day slavery. I don't know how many millions.
Absolutely there are. Absolutely there are. And if we're going to go into the history, why are we not talking about where the root of the word slave comes from? It comes from the Slavs. Why are we not talking about the history of slavery everywhere else? Okay, fine. The way that I think that you get past this historical trauma is you kind of have to eat the whole thing and you have to digest it. Slavery in America, with the help of the Brits, was and African Muslims. It was African Muslims that helped to acquire the black animist non-Muslim slaves. It was a uniquely horrendous experience. We don't have anything else in recorded history that matches that. So it's unique suffering, but so now what? So now what? Are we gonna, what do you want to do? What do you like? If this was therapy and I was talking to an individual, you can always work with individuals. It's very hard to work with collectives. What needs to happen for you to move forward from that? What needs to happen for you to feel okay? And if the answer comes back, reparations or something like that, I'm very, very against that kind of a movement, because it corrupts both sides.
Yeah.
Is there a solution in the middle? You guys are Americans. I'm not American. I'm an outsider. Do you guys think there's a solution in the middle where an effort is made to uplift some of these communities economically? So that
absolutely not. I think in my opinion, affirmative action, for example, has been in America for decades, and it's absolutely racist, and it hurts white people in particular, because it's special privileges. It's basically, for example, with colleges, it's giving people access to college things not on the basis of merit, but on the basis of race. Is there
another option other than affirmative action, which I don't like either? It's style.
Well, people who are not victims trying to punish people who are not the abusers is just delusional. It's beyond delusion. It's Orwellian. I didn't enslave people. My parents didn't enslave people. My grandparents didn't enslave people. My grandparents were from Croatia and stuff, and Norway. Even if they were original American revolutionaries and stuff, this is all like just absolutely. When is it, like, there's no end to it? The minute you open that door, there's no end to it, and that's why I think people are really alarmed right now. They're seeing like this, basically like a Marxist revolution, trying to hide behind race relations and things like this. It's really creepy stuff, man. The reparations, I think, is a really fantastic example of that. Like, it's just totally fucked up. I talked to a friend the other day who's you know, in the active military in the United States, and his parents are Italian. His history is Italian and like Ecuadorian or something like that, like South America. And he's like, I'm not fucking paying for this shit. Like, this is fucking crazy. And he's like, he doesn't want to see anyone pay for it, but he's like, this is, you know, I'm a taxpayer. It's fucking delusional. So that's my thoughts on it.
Ken, would you like to walk through the minefield?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you telling me that silence is violence?
Basically,
Violence is consent, and consent is no. They have the consent thing too.
That's the thing. Yeah, that's no, that's me. I'm just listening because I'm going. This is a minefield.
Yeah, totally.
Really well put with that. But I think going back to what we were talking about, the whole thing. Richard, you were talking about the whole thing of this thing being a collective. Where it's how does a collective take responsibility for change, and I think we're saying that it's not going to happen, and I think it's change. You said this. You were saying, if we were sitting in a therapy office, it would be an individual, and we'd talk about what's your responsibility for making a difference and changing how you roll and changing what you believe and changing your behavior and changing. Making the changes within, becoming less codependent or whatever it is. There's so many different avenues to become stronger as a person. And I have to take that as mine. And I think it seems as though that's where change, the only place that change can happen is individuals choosing, I'm going to be different. I'm going to not be a victim. I'm going to take responsibility and make a difference for my life. And then in my community, I can actually have that influence to where I would help other people to make those changes as well. And it's taking ownership and being able to say, this is where I'm going. This is where I would love for my family to go. This is where I'd love for my community to go. And making that kind of change. I don't see any other place where change is going to happen. Because the system right now is you were just talking about reparations, and it's like that's just like the same system of the rescuers here to give me more money and give me more stuff, and they're the ones that are going to help me out, and that's never going to equate into true valuable change for any individual or any community at all.
So
yeah, go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say, if I'm sat here thinking about it, I'm not a politician, sadly, or an economist. If race was taken out of the equation, is there any effort that can be made to help people who are in very economically deprived areas? Because we talk about making change for yourself and getting out of, say, the projects or the roughest areas of Liverpool down the road here, where people still walk around with medieval diseases and gingivitis. It's rough. They're all white, but I look at that and I'm like, how
Dude, just tell them they have white privilege. That'll fix all that.
Just use that white privilege. But if your dad's an alky, your mum is, dealing drugs, and your dad's off, your mum's dealing drugs. I mean, around here, what happens with the kids in school? Mum's working on the side as a prostitute and a drug dealer. Dad's off. There's men in the house, dangerous men in the house. You have to go outside the house. There's kids in schools I used to work around here. They'll be like, why are you tired? I didn't get to bed until 3. Why? You are on street corners waiting to stab people. No, my mum throws me out until 3 a.m, and then I'm allowed to sleep with my brother in the same bed until, this kind of economic deprivation where you think, fucking hell, geniuses must be having the genius beat out of them every day. Is there anything we can do? Anything you guys? I mean, I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. Is there anything that can be done for people in that?
Well, let me throw a grenade into a minefield.
Why would you do that?
When I see red flags, I light them on fire. So there we go. So this came out a couple days ago. The governor of Kentucky, a state in America, wants to ensure that health coverage for 100% of Black residents legally, not like some, I'm going to personally support it as governor, but like through the state. And this, to me, this is so. What I want to get at is I have a very radical proposition to what you're saying, Richard. And the proposition is to treat everyone equally before the law. And that means ending affirmative action, ending special privileges for any race or anything minority or anything like that. All of it needs to end. All of it causes more problems than it creates. For example, there's a lot of economists that will tell you, and they'll write about in their opinion, that welfare and things like that they actually keep people trapped in poverty. This is true for single mothers. This is stuff they get. This is true for, you know, minorities and stuff, anyone, regardless of what your race is. You're getting wealth that you didn't earn. And wealth, unearned wealth, in my opinion, destroys you. Lottery winners are an extreme example of this. Lottery winners consistently go bankrupt. They get addicted to drugs. They ruin their lives. After getting millions of dollars, they just blow, they detonate, they self-destruct. So, I mean, there's an empathetic, compassionate push to help people who are in lower socioeconomic, you know, demographics and stuff. But I think you have to be very, very careful about all that, because the minute you treat people unequally before the law, the minute you dish out and dole out any kind of, especially the government, I'm saying, charities and nonprofits, I mean, all day long, let's do it. But the minute you weaponize government, which is an agent of force, George Washington, you know, described it as like a fire. Fire, it can help you, it can cook your food, or it can burn your house down. So I think all of it's very dangerous. And really, people need freedom. They need liberty. They need, especially, you know, I was going to say Ayn Rand, a philosopher, was famous for saying that the smallest minority on earth is the individual, not any group or race or demographic. It's the individual. And what individuals need is personal responsibility they need to take for themselves. And they need liberty. They need freedom that is protected by the government. And that means equal treatment before the law for men, women, white, black, Asian, everyone. And in America, the more people get roped, I think, into logical fallacies and emotional impulsive thinking, the more they want to do all this stuff, they panic. I think what's going on right now is, you know, the riots are a form of panicking, this frantic energy, flipping over cars and throwing bottles and shit and fighting with police and spitting on people, abolish the police, all this stuff. It's all this frantic, unhinged energy, in my opinion. And it's not going to solve anything. Because there's a lot of reasons: the lack of agency, personal responsibility, self-improvement, trying to get, like you're saying, Richard, I think Ken was talking about this too, you know, stuff from, you know, people you claim are your oppressors, like this victim rescuer narrative. So it's all, a lot of it's well-intentioned, but man, so much of it's, I think, just a toxic whirlwind of stuff right now. And no, people, if you want to see people do well, you need to give them freedom. You need to protect their freedom. You need to treat them equally before the law, and not treat them negatively before the law or positively. Both of those are harmful. And eventually those consequences will reach everyone, whether it's through, you know, Marxist revolution and book burning and all kinds of weird stuff, or other things too. So those are my thoughts. That I'll probably get, you know, flamed for on the internet, but whatever. I don't know if you guys have any responses to that or further thoughts on that.
I do.
Go for it, Richard.
The one of the things the young gentleman who asked the question before that I would want to double down on and make clear is, in psychology, you'll often hear people say, "Oh, this person has narcissism or psychopathy, so therefore they're not to blame, they're not liable, they're depressed, they're not liable." And that exists. I'm not of that view. I'm pretty sure you're more on the personal responsibility side as well, right? Obviously some people have problems, they have psychotic delusions, hallucinations. That's, you know, that's a different thing. Just because you have CPTSD doesn't mean you're not accountable in the eyes of the law. So we were not saying that justifies anything. So when you extrapolate forward from that, it's a tough one, because I would probably be, I mean, I have CPTSD. I have terrible CPTSD to the point of like suicidal ideation 5 or 6 years ago. And I worked through it, and I wasn't rich. I was poor in Asia. I was eating rotten biscuits to try and survive in Asia, where you can get a full meal for $5 very, very easily. I ran out of money because I was so depressed. My business went to the wall. I was fucked. And I just think, it sounds trite to say a philosophy of personal responsibility is what you need, but mate, I'm talking to the young gentleman here. There's nothing else in this world, you know. It's pretty hard, this world. It's pretty fucking hard. And if you don't, I don't know what else to tell you. And I'm not talking to you as a white man to a black man. I'm talking to you as an elder to a younger. You're younger than me, I can see from your picture. Mate, it's hard. It's hard for everyone out here. It's no fucking picnic, and you do have to be quite tough. I hate saying just, you know, have a philosophy of rugged individuality. It sounds trite, but I don't think there's anything else. And I couldn't hear anything that you said before, Anthony, that I would disagree with. I would
only further qualify what I say, that everyone needs to be treated equally before the law, and, you know,
including cops.
Including cops, and George Floyd was denied that.
Yeah.
George Floyd deserved, I assume, because of what he was doing, to be arrested. He did not deserve to be killed. He deserved due process, all of which was denied from him in a very explicit and abusive and horrifying way, as far as we can tell from the videos and everything like that. So yeah, there's some major fuck ups there, and a lot of that might be, you know, police unions doing squirrely shit for decades. The city government, the mayor, the city council, the state government having a total lack of accountability for law enforcement. Like, why did this guy have so many complaints for 18 years? So there's a lot of everyone needs to be treated for law, including cops.
If we were on a security team and we had a guy like that, there's no fucking way we keep him. I mean, you might even give him a code red, especially if you saw him doing stuff like that. I mean, that's what we've seen on video, and that's what's been reported. What else has that cunt been getting away with for 17 years? He was a real nasty piece of shit. Nasty piece of shit.
We had a comment here from somebody. Do you want to go, Ken?
Yeah, I was going to just say something on the, because I think, you know, Anthony, you were talking about a number of different issues and things. And I think, and I was talking about, you know, taking personal responsibility. And I think that's absolutely true. That's why I'm saying it. But I really do think that this does come back to how can we have an adult conversation about what's really going on, you know, with something that might be systemic. Because I do think that, Richard, you were pushing in on the whole thing of the prison industry and how that actually does have evidence that there's something systemically racist about that system. And that may be just one category. And so being able to have the adult conversation about what really is going on, that I think there really are some categories that are still there. And I think that's part of what we want to do. And this is what I love about the United States is, sure, it started on some really shaky ground with, like I said, the dehumanization of people groups, and then we shifted and changed, and we're growing, and we're shifting into, you know, the Civil War happened, the civil rights things happened, and we're in a new spot here, and I think that's why I wish we had vision to be able to go, this is where we're going, and this is what we want, and we want less racism, but the thing is, what we're talking about is we feel like everybody's you know, and the whole thing of the zeroing people out and dehumanizing and othering because you disagree, that creates it where we can't even have a conversation about any of this stuff.
Yep.
And I think we need to have a conversation without all the animosity, or since you have a different opinion or you think that's different, that we can't even talk. And I think we just need to talk. Gosh, what am I saying? Maybe that's all I'm saying is the adult conversation needs to happen, and it's not. Yeah. And we can't have it because you can't have an opposing opinion. You can't even have a conversation right now. And that's probably what's necessary. And I hope we can get to a spot where we can start at least having a reasonable conversation about whatever it is. And I'm not sure who's going to be doing that, because it's like from top to bottom, it just feels insane right now.
Yeah, there's so much hostility to an adult conversation and free speech. I mean, cancel culture is kind of a workaround to the First Amendment, you know, using private companies and, you know, these pressure groups to ruin people's lives. We've seen that in the manosphere and with feminism and, you know, wokeness for years now. And now we're seeing it with this stuff too, banning Gone with the Wind and books and stuff. Yeah, an adult conversation rests upon a foundation of free speech and the ability to speak and to be heard. You don't have a right, you know, people don't have an obligation to listen to you, but you certainly have a right to speak openly and freely with what you think. I did want to make one challenge to what you said, Ken, with the systemic racism or something. I don't believe that's the case, but I'm not saying that's impossible. What I would say, though, is that you don't want to confuse correlation with causation. So just because something is majorly affecting certain groups of people or a race, that doesn't necessarily lead. Racism is a very specific concept, bigoted prejudice, basically. Mm-hmm. And you can't draw that conclusion automatically. You have to prove your reasoning for it. And I think that's where the rub is coming from, because without question, there's a huge amount of black men and other minorities in prison for various crimes. Mm-hmm. A lot of this stuff's stupid. I think anyone in prison right now for a nonviolent drug offense should be pardoned immediately. And really everyone, white, black, Asian, whatever, I don't care. That would depopulate the prisons massively And I think the war on drugs is beyond
It would
stupid
also
anyway.
demonetize them.
What?
It would also demonetize the prisons.
It would demonetize the prisons.
Yeah, and the prison's a massive industry.
Yeah, totally. And that does disproportionately affect blacks and Hispanics and whatever. But I don't know if that necessarily means racism. I mean, maybe the war on drugs.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
let's have the freaking conversation.
No, totally. That's the most important thing is the conversation. And when that breaks down, you get I mean, a lot of people are, worried right now. I think rightfully so. YouTubers like Tim Pool to speakers I know that a real civil war could break out in America right now or in the near future. And however unlikely that may be, I don't think it's impossible. I was commenting the other day on Twitter, it's been 155 years since we had a civil war in this country. Maybe that amount of time we should be thankful for without shooting each other. I mean, and also, do we really expect that to go on indefinitely, forever? I mean, if you consider the American Revolution a civil war, and many historians do, because colonials consider themselves Englishmen in a lot of cases. You went out, how many years was that? 80 years or something? Between major civil wars like that. 155 is pretty good. And while I want to see that go on as long as it can, I don't know if it's reasonable on a large scale historical perspective to expect that to go on to infinity, like literally forever. Is that going to be I'm kind of going off on tangent here, but it's been something that, with it comes to mind because the conversation's dying, and it's like, what happens when the conversation is dead?
Yes.
And I fear that we're getting close to that.
That's possibly what the problem is. I suspect that it's actually that we're running out of ideas. And as we've had this conversation, talking with you two, I'm sort of seeing it a little bit differently. I'm like, maybe this rush to demonstrate, to riot, to get to the White House, this Marxist sort of, and at times Stalinist effort, is because of a lack of ideas. There's no big idea that counters it. I mean, the American dream, for example, while people aren't thinking, yeah, my life's really going to be massively upwardly mobile or even in my kids' lifetimes. So if people are in despair, I'm saying it could be an idea issue. So Marxism is a big idea. And maybe it's the big idea that counters empty space, nothingness, nihilism. And we can't have endless consumer capitalism. That's not going to work out. We probably do need, I've always said we need a revolution, but what we're getting now is not the revolution we need. We need a revolution of ideas, not like, you overthrow the people who are in power so that you can be in power. So, the king is dead, long live the king.
I think we need a revolution of masculinity and femininity. I really think that's what all the races obviously share. I think it's by far some of the most important concepts of a human being is what is your experience of being a human being based on your biological sex, and that's masculinity or femininity.
Well, these big crises, Anthony, the big pandemic that caused a global lockdown. My God, the war with Iran at the beginning of the year is a joke now compared to the very immediate problems we faced. Yeah. Civil war on the horizon. And you say that without smiling. It's actually a real legitimate possibility. Yep. It's pain, and change is always pain. But I actually do think that it will herald a sexual revolution. I think it's already begun. I actually think, so the positive I see here is that men and women will come back to each other, and that love will be back on the table, because we won't be investing in the horse shit of this statist idea. We'll be like, there's nothing out there. It's an illusion. It's this Potemkin village. Don't believe it anymore. Let's come back to each other. Yeah, actually, I really like women. And women say, yeah, actually, I quite like men. Let's have love back again. That's on the table. But at what cost?
Yeah, well put, Richard. I think, it is coming. The coronavirus, I forgot, I think really highlighted the differences between men and women. And all of a sudden, you saw a lot of comments on the internet and on Twitter and blogs and stuff. Women were, a lot of, girlfriends are calling up their boyfriends or ex-boyfriends. All of a sudden, they want to get back together. All of a sudden, the wife is like, I don't know, stuff like that. But yeah, it's, go ahead.
I was just going to say, beyond, I hate the issue of race. It's awful. It's an awful divisive topic. And then you get onto another issue like a virus that nobody can see. We're unified. Or you get onto another issue like love and relationships, sex, sexuality, the sort of the gender dynamics. We're all unified. And they're not, or narcissism, CPTSD. These are not racially based things. That's just the human experience. It's difficult to say this is a white person. I feel like it's a big evil trick. I feel like it's a big trick the devil plays on us that goes, you're all intrinsically different. Why? Because your skin color is different. I'm not denying history. I'm not denying classism. I'm saying it becomes, there's a new word I learned. You can feel like something is true and it seems to be true. That's a superstition. If you feel like something is true and it seems to be true, and then you act as if it is true, it becomes something called a hyperstition. And that's where I think race is up to. I'm not the white guy saying scrub it so that we don't have to deal with this problem anymore. I'm saying I don't think we're going to resolve racism from within racial divisions. I think most problems in therapy actually have to be transcended rather than pushed against, rather than fought.
I was looking, by the way, as you're speaking, with the Black Lives Matter website again, what we believe, and there's more comments here. I didn't even see this, but it's just relating to a lot of what you're saying here. We build a space that affirms Black women is free from sexism, misogyny, and environments in which men are centered. We practice empathy. We engage comrades. Holy shit! The Marxism, the Stalinist here is explicit.
Well, even the font is Soviet, mate. Look at Shop All. That's fucking Soviet font.
Jesus. But it's really interesting though, how much, this is there's no mention here, of course, of misandry. There's no celebration of fatherhood. Fathers are not even mentioned. Yeah, it's very hostile, I think, to masculinity and femininity. And I think this will be an issue going forward for them. I think they've fucked up and stabbed themselves in the foot doing this, opposing these positive things. Or just ignoring, the ways that men are treated today, treated like shit.
The other thing I would say, mate, within the Black conspiracy community that, as I say, I got connected to because of COVID and the lockdown, there's a lot of, there's different thoughts about the protests and the riots, but there's plenty of Black people, especially in the conspiracy movement, who are not down for BLM at all. Not at all. Yeah.
Yeah. In America, even, I was seeing the other day that, Black Americans represent about 14% of the population. And, I think it's over 40 million people. So the amount of people actually marching in support of it is actually very small. It's a very vocal minority. And a lot of Black people are getting pissed off. You're seeing videos go viral on YouTube and on Twitter a lot. I saw one last night. This Black woman was really angry, and that's when it went viral, but screaming about how she was criticizing Black Lives Matter and stuff because her brother was dead, her son was dead, her husband was dead. And they were, I guess, shot by other Black people in rough neighborhoods and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of, I think the internet speeds things up, but sometimes in real life there's a slow response to it. And as people wake up, like you're saying, Black people who don't agree with it, who have criticisms of it, that's going to be interesting going forward, seeing them speak up and stuff. Even in celebrities, like Terry Crews is speaking out against it, and Zuby.
Yeah. It's the internet creates massive acceleration and then mass media. I've never in my whole life seen such massively irresponsible reporting as we're seeing now from the major news networks. I mean, they are just flying monkeys delivering a gaslighting message. There's nothing, barely anything that's of any nutritional sustenance or intellectual value that's ever said on the mainstream news networks. So there's a real nasty agenda here that towards division, because it gives the news, this dying format, more content. Yeah. So COVID and the riots have been great for mainstream media, because prior to that, we weren't watching them anymore. We were bored of it. Now we're all tuning into them every day.
Ironically, though, their advertising fell off a cliff. So they got the views, but not the money, which is pretty funny.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, during COVID anyway. All the businesses are going bankrupt, man. No one's advertising shit. Yeah.
But that goes back to who's getting the attention, and everybody's calling for attention. And it's our responsibility of who am I going to give my attention to? So many people have stopped watching the whole panic porn stuff and stopped watching the news. And I think to your point, Richard, they're realizing that, this is total misinformation on any category that the news gives us. And so we're starting to go, how do I actually find out, what's true here? What's the real narrative of what's going on? Because everybody's telling a story, and it's up to each one of us to be able to, as best we can, to discern, what's the truth that's going on here.
Yeah, in the middle of this disinformation, dishonesty storm of just chaos. Yeah. So I want to kind of round this out, guys, and start wrapping up. Go ahead, Richard. Do you have a comment?
I was just going to say, simply marvelous stuck with us. So we must have we must have been still saying something worthwhile because he stuck with it.
Yeah.
Thank you, simply marvelous.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I kind of want to round out the show and just kind of get some final thoughts from you guys on basically the connection you see between trauma and the chaos that we've seen. Both, the protest people that are legitimately peaceful, but kind of chaotic, don't have a vision or a message or a too specific of a goal. And then, of course, the violent side of it and looting and stuff. So some final thoughts on trauma and chaos and CPTSD, whatever, however you want to spin it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like I said, not necessarily not talking a lot about trauma and everything, but I think, the whole thing of the ways that systems change, and we're in a big, huge system. The United States culture is a system, and how we operate and how we roll. It's just like a family system, and everybody has their parts, and it has a goal, and it has its homeostasis, and it's all designed to keep everything running the same. But we're in this space right now where something's changing, and the whole thing of whether it's the coronavirus, whether it's the riots, we're in this crazy spot. And the way that the three words that kind of map out change is the whole thing of you have a certain order, and then it turns into disorder, and then you move toward reorder.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea of we were in an order, and things were the way they were, and now we're in this place of disorder. It all depends, because Richard, you said something really significant. Is this just a festival? Is it just or is it something of real deep substance? And if it is something that's deep substance, then this disorder is actually going to help us to move into a new reorder. And that's where the whole idea of vision comes. What's this new reorder that we want? And who's going to actually create that? And I think people are, like I said, there's this element that wants to blow shit up and create disorder. There's a group out there that just wants to create disorder, but there's no vision for what the reorder is looking like. And I do think that people who have vision, people who have an idea, people who have a good sense of what a healthy movement for our whole culture would be. It's time for, I hope that some people rise up, some individuals, somebody who really can lead this thing into something that looks a hell of a lot more healthy than where we've been. Because there are parts of that aren't healthy. There are parts of it that aren't going well. So being able to have a vision for that reorder, because we're right in the middle of disorder, but I would love for something to happen. It's a great opportunity for our culture. It's a great opportunity for something to change into something that's a lot. I keep using the word healthy. I don't know what other word to use.
Positive.
Oh, there you go. Positive for sure.
I would add, Ken,
unified, positive.
Yeah. I would say it's a great opportunity for fatherhood and masculinity.
I think so.
Yeah. Rich?
Yeah. Well, by, the fatherhood, masculinity, adulthood, motherhood, femininity, all of it for humanity, for everybody. If that's the path we choose to go down, just to make a point, though I said before about it having the festival atmosphere, there's an authentic unconscious drive. I'm concerned that it gets sublimated, to use the lingo, or sort of, which means like translated into the cheap manifestation of it. What I'd like to see is the sort of channeling of that libidinous energy into something in a way that is disciplined, that is patient, and that actually has a structure. Because I think some of the grievances are valuable, and we've always got things done like this. America is a nation built on entrepreneurialism, rebellion, and striving forward bravely into the future. And it's not known for being super polite and suave and quiet about that. It's known for smashing people in the face and getting shit done. So maybe we're seeing, this initial phase is smashing people in the face, and then maybe we go, okay, what do we need to do? Like, how the fuck do we fix this thing and move forward? And if we can get there, then yeah, I'd be very, very hopeful.
I think it's a really good point, Richard. Maybe a lot of the chaos and the outbursts we're seeing is in some way American. I mean, it's hard to imagine Canada having, this level of chaos, for example. And America is
against Canadians,
Yeah, I mean, no, this is a good point. The country was founded not just on rebellion, but violence. I mean, diplomacy and peacemaking did not work with the king. And with the parliament and stuff. We had to, George Washington didn't talk the British to death; he shot them. I'm not advocating for violence now. I don't think it's a good thing. In this instance, I think there's a lot of diplomacy and talking left to be had, adult conversations as we've been talking about. But yeah, I wonder if you mix American culture that still I think exists with a pretty solid couple generations of single motherhood and feminism and stuff. What are you going to get? Well, apparently this is what you get. Like there's an element of rebelliousness in American culture and entrepreneurship and radicalness. I mean, we're the radicals of the world with the Declaration of Independence. It has like the most well-known phrase in the entire world across any language. The pursuit of life, liberty, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So yeah, it's an interesting point, Rich, that maybe what we're seeing is, as uncomfortable and violent as it may be, maybe it's uniquely American for this to start here anyway, and then spread it, and then it just spreads everywhere else. Congratulations. Yeah. Well, we're going to round out the show. It's been a great episode, guys. Episode 107 of the Red Man Group. I did want to mention that very soon, Richard Grannon will be having the first ever premium workshop course on 21 University come out. So that's coming out very soon. It's like a 10-part video series. A lot of it was filmed live at the 21 Convention 2019. And then actually Richard went out and filmed more interviews with guest speakers for the workshop, like Sean Smith, like Jack Donovan, AJ Cortez, and George Bruno. So there's a lot of video content. It's a full premium course on healing from complex trauma. It's going to be a masterclass in understanding and healing from these things as a man, specifically. And that'll be the first ever course we host as premium exclusive to 21U. I'm excited to get that going very soon. And you guys can stay tuned on YouTube and social media and stuff for that. Everything else, I appreciate you guys' time today, Richard and Ken. You can find Richard, of course, directly at SpartanLifeCoach.com. And you can find Ken Curry at solidman.com. And Richard's speech from 21Con just came out on 21 Studios. You can check that out. And Ken's will be out pretty soon as well on the YouTube channel. It's also the early at 21university.com. So appreciate you guys' time today. Fuck yeah.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah. And for everyone else watching, I'll see you next Saturday at 11:30 a.m. Special guest on the show and episode 108. Peace out.